Inspiring contractors to deliver exceptional craftsmanship with proven results. This is the High Performance HVAC podcast by the National Comfort Institute.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the High Performance HVAC podcast. I am one of your hosts, Adam Mufich with National Comfort Institute, and I am here with two great gentlemen this morning. My boss and mentor, David Richardson.
You always make me uncomfortable when you say that.
The vice president of training at NCI, and then Tom Noland. How are you guys doing this morning?
Good, brother. How y'all doing?
Very good. Very good. Good to chat with you guys.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so this past week, we got an email from Tom, and I was just kind of chatting with him a bit, and we were kind of digging into some of the success you've been having, Tom. And I thought it was just hearing your story was amazing, and I thought it would be, pretty valuable to contractors out there to kind of go through and just hear what is possible if you do things the right way. So
Yeah, of course. Like NCI, I've been an NCI fan for near 20 years, and I thought I was pretty good air conditioning tech and business owner before I got into NCI and the training that it offers. But obviously, once I got trained I got trained on the airflow side first, and then quickly after that, we got trained on the combustion side, and then we quickly made it an entire business model out of it. How we go to market, how we make sure that customers are receiving the best possible service, and just going through all the the airflow and the combustion, and looking at delivered efficiencies and things of this nature. Static pressure, obviously, combustion analysis. We really turned it into a full business model.
that's awesome. So you know what? I'm interested to hear like how early on in your career you started implementing and learning some of the NCI things. But why don't we get some of your background? Like, let's
Yeah,
hear
sure.
how'd you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, so I've been doing air conditioning and plumbing and electrical work for 30 years. I started out as an air conditioning install helper, and when I was 20 years old, so I'm 50 now, so I've been doing it for quite a bit. Back in those days, it was you go ride with the installer, and you figure out how to do it. And this was in the Northern Virginia market, and we would we made our sheet metal up on site. And over the years, we had our own in my later years, we had our own sheet metal shop, especially doing a lot of airflow renovations. So I learned the trade just like most people, right? I went through a 4-year apprenticeships program in the state of Virginia. I started my first business when I was 24 years old. I hadn't quite turned 25, and I just learned my way throughout the years. Certainly had a lot of advice from a lot of different best practice groups and things along the way. But I grew that first business over 16 years or so, and we ended up selling that one to a larger roll-up competitor in that market. And then quickly, a couple of years later, between my first and second company, I actually went on the road and did some training on my own, and would do ride-alongs with technicians, teach them how to do airflow sales and upgrades, and certainly on the combustion analysis side. So we did a lot of that. And then 2 years later, we went back into business. We quickly grew that one to over 10 million, and then we sold that. And then we ended up in Florida, and we started a business down here. And we've been very fortunate here and blessed that the market is a high demand market, and we've been able to grow that business very quickly. We have a run rate this year of 70 million.
Nice.
That's not a small number.
Yeah. And
You're like, whoa!
And we've done that in 3 years. And that's not a brag thing, right? Like the demand was really high. There's a huge opportunity for airflow here. It's all flex duct. It's in the attic. It's very, you see a lot of these houses, people are on their second, third, fourth system, and nobody's touched the ductwork. Right. I can tell you a lot of pictures. We run a call by call process, and we really drive the behavior. And we use the vitals, right? We're using Measure Quick now. We use the vitals as the system to really determine, hey, and it really brings integrity into the business, because now when we make technicians upload photos of the vitals and the measure quick, the static pressure, and then we can communicate that to the homeowner if they even want to hear about it, right? Because some people, listen, the market nowadays with private equity and everything the way it is, there's a lot of very, highly driven sales organizations, and customers have heard it, right? They've heard it multiple times. But most people are going in there and just trying to sell them a high efficiency air conditioning system. And we look at it completely opposite, right? I would rather that customer invest the money properly and replace the ductwork. We go through the house, we do room by rooms, and a lot of that, what I've been really good at over the years is taking the airflow model and tying it to a personal impact. How does it personally impact you in your home? And if you're able to do that and discover with the homeowner why this static pressure, because it's just a number on a gauge to a homeowner. It doesn't mean anything to them. And most of the time, quite honestly, in my experience, they've been quite skeptical about it. So, how do we tie that into here's why you're experiencing the things you're experiencing in your home, right? And a lot of times it's just, hey, where do you keep your thermostat set at, right? Well, that's my number one question when I go into any home, whether it's a tune-up or a sales call or, opportunity call, whatever it may be. I want to discover, right? We got to do a lot of discovery around this thing, and we got to discover how the customer lives in the home. What type of problems are they experiencing? Because one thing I've noticed, and I'll get back to, how I got into NCI, but in my 20 years of doing airflow analysis and combustion analysis is, high performance air conditioning, is that a lot of people have been experiencing these problems for years. And a lot of companies just come out and keep telling them that's just the way it is. You need a new unit. You need a larger unit. Of course, we all know that those make those things much, much worse. When you install oversized equipment. So that's kind of been my philosophy for years. Once I learned it, I caught on to this very quickly. I started the trade, I think in 1995, went through the 4-year apprenticeship program, the state of Virginia, got licensed, started my own business. I would say probably, I'd always seen the NCI. I was a trained comfort specialist dealer back in those days, and they had NCI coming out twice a year. And I think I had sent a couple of technicians to the combustion training over the years. I didn't go personally. And then finally, I think in 2008-ish, somewhere around there, I went to the airflow class, and I was blown away, right? I was blown away about what I didn't know, what I thought I knew, right? Which is where, because you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of you see that every day in the air conditioning industry, right? And when you start talking about static pressure and start talking about delivered efficiency and capacity and all these things, how drastically static pressure affects those things, and just everything about an air conditioning system and the way it works, everybody leaves out the most critical piece of it, which is the airflow, right? If you don't move enough air across the coil or through the system, right? Everybody knows that's NCI trained what that does to a system: reduce the capacity, the efficiency, remove the sensible capacity. Like there's so many different things that it does that could be detrimental to that air conditioning system. But unfortunately, a lot of the manufacturers just train them, hey, sell a 2-stage, sell a 20 SEER plus system, and that'll solve all their ails. And it's quite the opposite, right? I discovered, just based on filtration alone, right? Like the installing the wrong air filter alone, just period, how you install an air filter drastically affects an air conditioning system. All these 1-inch pleated filters that we sell, that they sell at the big box stores and people buy on Amazon by the box load, and you'll see them. Some of them even write the static pressure on them. Hey, this thing's 0.25 to 0.5 clean, right? So we're already at 100% of our maximum static pressure budget just by putting the filter in. So we don't even leave anything for the ductwork. So, I'm a big, and I have for 20 plus years, we've always installed, 5-inch media cabinets on every job. We used to put them in the return drops in the Virginia market because we had big return drops, and we always put them in, with transitions, and really to even drop that pressure, because, the filter pressure drop on like an April Air, 4-inch media cabinet is 0.12 on a 3-ton system clean. And, that's a lot better than 0.25 clean, because once it loads up, those 1-inch pleated filters that people think they last 3 months. They do a great job of stopping dust and dirt, but they stop the airflow too. So we install 5-inch media cabinets, or on standard on every install. That solves a lot of static pressure problems, right? A lot of times it's just the filter. But certainly there's always airflow upgrades available on every call. Every home needs it. It's just a fact of, hey, how can we tie this to the customer's personal impact? How does it affect their life? Do they even notice it? Are they aware of it? And how do we inform and educate the customer, and then just simply offer them a choice as to how if they would like to even be interested in solving any of these problems? Because a lot of people aren't, right? Let's just be honest. A lot of people don't care. They're like, yeah. But then there are people that do care, right? Because they understand why their daughter's bedroom or the bonus room is never comfortable or what have you. And then, so for me personally, what you see over the years, a lot of people add zoning to systems, and, then that makes it 10 times worse, right? Because now we've really increased the static pressure. And then they use things that bypass dampers and things, which I'm not a fan of. So I've really implemented the airflow model way back then. We made it part of our process. Heat max, cool max is way I started out. The old paper forms we used to make systems do them, especially on gas furnaces, right? It's so super critical. Now, there's not a lot of gas here in Florida, obviously, but it makes it so super critical to dial that airflow relation to the combustion analysis and how both of those things affect each other. So you have to have both if you're working on gas. You have to understand the airflow side and the combustion side and be able to dial that system in. Because if you're running a tune-up on a gas furnace, you need to be able to dial it in. And a lot of people, it's not just as simple as hooking up a manometer. Nowadays, they say 3.2 to 3.6 inches of water column. Well, there could be a big difference between that 3.2 and 3.6 of how that furnace is actually operating. And are we causing premature failures because we're overfiring or underfiring, or so there's a lot of, I've taken this to a level where I eat and breathe it. My entire business is focused on airflow.
Tastes good, doesn't it?
What's that?
They do eating airflow, living this stuff. It's fun.
Yeah, I live it, breathe it, brother. I have for 20 years, right? And even in Virginia, where you couldn't, certainly in attic systems, we all know we can get to those and replace them, or crawl spaces, we can replace those duct systems. But in in a basement situation, we had a lot of finished bases in Virginia, but we found ways to improve air to fix static, right? We found ways, right? It's and those are, in a tune-up season, like in Virginia, where we basically had a 10-month shoulder season, right? We might have one good month, 6 weeks of summer, maybe 4 to 6 good weeks of winter, and the rest of it is shoulder season time, right? So when you go in these homes and you discover, do a good discovery, do a good checklist, and then manage the technicians, right? Because that's the other piece of it. How do we train our technicians? How do we develop them? Most of the schools and stuff nowadays, they just don't spend any time on static pressure. It's kind of more of an, oh, by the way, check this, right? Yeah. But they're not plotting a fan curve. They're not getting a CFM chart out and looking at what is the max allowable static pressure through that system. What I've noticed here in Florida, there's a lot of systems that are rated at 0.2. A lot of them, right? So out of the box, the manufacturer's saying 0.2. Well, we're done, right? Where are we going to run it on, right? Where are we going to put it? Because even you put a pleated filter in there, obviously it's done right there. We're already over the max allowable static pressure of that system. So, we understand how drastically it reduces capacity and efficiency of the system. But, clear back to when I first got involved with NCI, immediately implemented it into the business, immediately saw impact. In those areas, we would do a lot of aeroseal and stuff as well. But, sometimes that can make it worse, right? We seal the duct system, our static pressure went from 0.6 to 0.8 to 1 inch. But also the other way too, right? Because you can have really low static and people say, oh, you look, it's fine. It's at 0.3. Go up in the attic, because I can promise you something's disconnected, right? Probably somewhere. So there's static pressure and just the vitals itself, and now using Measure Quick and tying all that together in productive way where we can give the customer a report card and determine, hey, there's no guesswork in this. We're going to test in, and then we're going to redesign your air distribution system based on technical data. And we do a load calc obviously on every single job. We do it, re-engineer the duct design based on NCI standards, right? Because when you think about the spreadsheet that we have for NCI duct design, I mean, I've carried one of these around with me for 30 years, right? But how many people don't know how to use one of these? So, and everybody uses it differently. Because if everybody knew how to use this, well, then we wouldn't have all these airflow opportunities, right? So, we standardize it with the NCI duct design chart.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was telling you a story the other day, Tom, that I was doing a class, and we gave an example of, hey, if your static pressure is this, like on your return side, your supply side, what would you guys do? And everyone's like, well, I would size the return duct correctly. I'm like, okay, how would you go about sizing the return duct correctly? And a good handful of the guys said I would use a ductulator. And then my follow-up question was, how do you use a ductulator correctly? And nobody had an answer. And my response to that is, if you're using manual D and you're going through the design process and you know how to correctly calculate a friction rate, go for it. It's awesome. It's amazing. But you can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you attempt to use a ductulator and you're not trained on how to use it, because there's a lot of rules of thumb out there, right?
I've been there. I can remember back in the mid '90s when I worked for one of my mentors, Jim Seltzer, one of my superheroes. I worked for them, and that I was a young kid. I never had any exposure to ductwork, and there was really nobody in the business that did. And we had I think a customer had an addition or something that I didn't do a lot. I didn't come up in the new construction trade, right? Everything I've been has been on the retail side, service, install, replacement. But we had to do duct work, right? And I really didn't know how to do it. I knew how to do the transitions and everything to change out a piece of equipment, but now we're talking about installing trunk lines and how do you size it. I had a ductulator. I didn't know how to use it, and I can promise you that we had to go back and replace every stitch of that ductwork. Right, unit wouldn't work. It just wouldn't. Right, it was so drastically undersized. So I've been that guy. Right, so I know what it's like to not know about airflow and not know how to use a ductulator. Of course, I learned how to use a ductulator very well over the years. But just to standardize it in your business, you just use the NCI. We laminate it. We have full-time engineers, if you will, that are dedicated to redesigning duct systems for our customers in the community, to ensure that when we go back with new ductwork, that we do it the right way. We give the customer different options, right? So we'll go everything from antimicrobial blue duct all the way down to R6. So we use antimicrobial R8, standard silver R8, and then we use R6 with flex duct. But with Florida and it's all flex duct, the sizing of it is it's imperative.
So you mentioned Measure Quick and how you test in and test out in that. Measure Quick, obviously I'm a big fan of Measure Quick because you're proving performance. It actually gives you real measured values. And it's basically a third-party verification where it gives you a report card of what the equipment is actually doing. I think a lot of contractors out there think that I'm going to install a 4-ton piece of equipment and it's going to be a 4-ton piece of equipment. But David, I was wondering, maybe you could talk a little bit about delivered efficiency in that and what happens with airflow and some of the findings that we've had at NCI.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to what Tom's pointing out. And in the area of the country that he's in, if there was a worst possible place that you could pick to put an HVAC system, it's Florida, because everything's in the worst place you could put ducts and equipment, right? You're trying to run 55-degree air through a space that, unless it's the attic's foamed, it's 130 to 140 degrees, and you got an 85-degree delta T. That makes no sense. But those are the conditions you got to deal with.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we got to deal with.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't understand, and this is where we go back to something that we've preached for decades at NCI. is that the equipment's not the system. The equipment's a component of the system. And one of the things you just pointed out, Tom, with the ducts is that is the most critical piece of the duct system, because can it get those BTUs from the equipment into the living space? Because that's what the customer is paying for. And that's where the distribution system makes such an impact. I think a lot of people don't realize just how much of a difference it makes. And Adam, you mentioned going back to some of the NCI studies back in 2005. I remember our family company, before I started with the NCI, we were part of those original studies. We sent in our test results. This is what we're finding on test in on a lot of systems in central Kentucky. And the average was 57%. And that number has actually gotten 2% worse over the years. But, sometimes they were a little better and sometimes they were a lot worse. You didn't know. You couldn't go in and look at a duct system and say, this one's going to test really bad. I've seen systems that looked good test horrible, and systems that were just ugly test awesome. Like, what happened?
Mhm.
Every now and then you get lucky. So it's all over the place. And Tom, to your point, if you're not testing, you don't know.
You don't know, right? Like I can walk into a house, right? Listen, at the end of the day, I am a businessman, right? Like, we're here to make a profit. When I walk into a customer's home and I see all that black on the registers and spraying out on the drywall everywhere, right? I immediately just go, okay, right? So we know that the register is not sealed to the space. So we know we're getting Venturi effect, and we're bringing in all that attic air and that
Yeah.
humid. So, you talk about delivered efficiency. I would promise you half the time the attic systems, if not more than half, right? It's not being sealed, the boot to the drywall, and you're losing 20% off the rip, 20% capacity loss, efficiency loss, just delivered efficiency through the registers. It's the biggest piece. Everybody walk around and look at, well, the duct size is good, but what about all these registers, right? Like that's the most critical point at where that air enters the space. So I see a lot of resistance to NCI philosophy, especially here in Florida. That airflow is, like, for some reason, we kind of get looked at, frowned upon. Quite honestly, especially by the competition. But I think it just scares them because they're not educated. I think they're just not educated on it, right? I was one of those guys at one
Yeah.
time, right? It doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you're uneducated in it, and the manufacturers don't spend enough time on it, right?
Yeah.
Because they want them selling those high dollar boxes. They want them moving that 20 SEER unit. And then when we got 17 service calls back to it because it's running 1 inch of static and it keeps dropping out, right? Because they do have, especially these new, I see people installing all these new, side discharge, high efficiency fits and this and that. And man, those things are super critical,
Yeah.
airflow critical. Like, unless you're replacing the ductwork, how could you possibly install one of those? To me, that's malpractice, right? But a guy like me comes in and says, hey, well, we need to replace all the ductwork. So I've always looked at it like this. The customer either thinks I'm the village idiot or the smartest guy in the room, right? And it's up to me to be able to communicate that in an effective way so the customer understands that, hey, we can't just go putting this in unless we fix this problem. We won't install a piece of equipment until we've measured, right? That's the discipline. Even when it's popular to, hey, the customer wants a 20 SEER inverter, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. What's the ductwork look like? What's the airflow look? What's the static pressure? Let's just start there. Where's the static? Okay, it's at 0.8. All right, why? Why is it 0.8? And then let's drill down and figure out what the real problem is. But we make our technicians do a complete as-built duct design. So we make them go in and do a drawing. Every time static pressure fails, we make the technician go in the attic and draw the duct system as is. And then we do a floor plan, and I could share some pictures with you. We do a floor plan. We make them do a floor plan because we got to do it room by room. We do a load count. That's automatic. We use EDS load report that Drew Cameron's part of.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan of that. We use that automatic on every call. We have a guy inside that creates it because you can type in the address. It certainly gives you a good block load, right? But then we break down the room by room. So it's a good design parameter. And then we re-engineer that airflow. And then, then you can have communications with the homeowners around the floor plan and the load calc and the, hey, Ms. Jones, we literally show them the NCI duct design chart and go, hey, this is National Comfort Institute. They're the authority on airflow design in the industry. And what, if you need 100 CFMs in this room, what size duct does it say you need? Right? Or,
Right.
oh, I need 300 CFMs. Okay, well, what size is a 6-inch carrier? Right? Maybe it's off the top of my head, I think it's 75. But let's so that's the model, right? It's all about communicating with the customer around the airflow and how it affects them. And I think that's the biggest thing that we miss as a contractor, because at the end of the day, the customer doesn't buy a new duct system because you showed them a gauge, right? That you showed them that, hey, your static
Great
pressure,
point.
that your pressure is 0.9. Okay. What does that mean to me personally?
Right.
Why?
So what?
So what? So what? Right? And we get that a lot. So what? Right? It's been that way for 20 years, Tom. Why do I care now? Fair enough, right? Because they are the end consumer. But at least if we educate them and give them a choice, right? Inform them, educate them, and offer them a choice based on the findings, the factual findings, such as the load calc, the measure quick, the static pressure, the duct design. And then if they have no desire to fix it, well, then that's a free marketplace, right? We can't force people to buy stuff, right? But then listen, if you do it consistently on every single call, that's where we've really implemented call by call in this current business, is because we look at the vitals first. I actually have a team of people that sit inside that are looking at every single service call that we run throughout the day and validating the diagnostics, the vitals of the system, right? Superheat, subcool, static, delta T tells you a lot, tells you a whole lot. And then if you put that in the measure quick, it really gives you a good picture, right? And now it's a third-party report that we can take to the customer and say, hey, it's not me saying this, right? And that's kind of how we used to use, the heat max and cool max back in the day, because we used to use the old paper, 2-part form to demonstrate that to the customer and make the technicians do the math. But there's simpler ways to do it. Just simply take the thermometer and show them what it is in the supply plenum, and then go around to the registers and show them the delta and say, hey, where do you think that's going? Right? Why do you think it's not 55-degree air coming out the other end here? And that right there will make them click.
Yeah, that's something I want to follow up on. You've made a couple of massive points. One was the fear of measuring. Guys, they fear measurement. And that's because once you measure something, you got to do something about it. You either have to acknowledge it and figure out what's going on, or you're going to ignore it. But what you've done is you've taken it and you've used it to serve your customers better. And then you're proving that work is actually doing what you said it was going to do. The other thing that you mentioned, and I think this is huge with that temperature test, is you mentioned the black around the supply registers and what that means in a Florida environment, because you guys deal not only with the sensible load of a building, but the latent load.
Wow.
And so many times people don't understand that the reason they can't keep a second floor comfortable is because they're pulling in that 130, 140 degree attic air through entrainment around those boots, and they're trying to condition it. So while your competition, who doesn't know better, is trying to sell them a bigger piece of equipment, you're looking at the true cause and saying, you know what you've got either may be sized right. We may be actually able to go down a size. Let's stop bringing the attic air into your house.
That's right. It's not just around the registers, right? Now we're getting into building performance a little bit. But I can't tell you how many times, the thermostat's in the hallway and look up at the ceiling. What's above you?
Yeah.
The attic access. Wonder why my electric bill's high, right? It's just simple things like that. Simple, right? Like I've gone up to, like, you just be aware in a home. There's all these little nuances, right? Like I've gone up to a return grill and put my hand on it and it felt hot, hot air coming out of it. And right now I got to go research, find out what, now there's a return disconnected in the attic somewhere. It just happens every day. That's why low static is sometimes a bigger alarm than the high static, right? If it's really high static, at least we know it could be a good, properly sealed duct system, but it doesn't mean it's sized properly. So we have to size the duct systems. It's as you said, it's a system, and those things. It doesn't matter how good, and of course, we can't determine how good the air conditioning system is working unless we have proper airflow. So it's really, you can't even begin the conversation about proper diagnostics in air conditioning unless the airflow is right, because everything else is an assumption and it's incorrect. So I've stood on my head for years since I've been a raving fan of the training that I've received over the years, and feel very blessed and fortunate to even be exposed to it, right? Because I can't imagine if I've spent the last 20 years still doing it wrong, right? Mm-hmm. But there's, I mean, you guys know, I mean, I don't know how many NCI members you have nationwide. How many contractors are NCI members nationwide? How many do we have?
A little over 300.
A little over 300.
That's member wise. We train
member wise.
Member wise, but I'm sure you've trained thousands over the years. But
training wise, we're upwards of over I think the 30 plus years. It's upwards of like 60,000 professionals NCI trained.
Right, but how many people? How many contractors are there? Right, that there's probably hundreds of thousands. I don't know the number, but I know there's several right here in Jacksonville, but in St. Augustine market. But but how many of those are testing airflow?
Right.
So, and I would say none. And then when they even, now I don't know that to be true, but I would assume none. But when they even sell customers new airflow systems and duct systems, they're just going back. Hey, there was a 6-inch boot there. Let's pop another 6-inch over here. There was a 7 over here. There was a 9 over here. We're going to put a 9 back in there. You just put it back new, but same problem. Static pressure, you didn't fix it, right? And if you don't fix static, you do not have an air conditioning system that's functioning per the manufacturer specifications. And of course, if you call the manufacturers, they'll let you know, oh yeah, your static's way too high. You got to fix that and then call me back, right? That's what FSRs do. So,
and then it gets to that how piece that you mentioned earlier, and that's one of the things that saved us with NCI training when we were contractors. Is not only does it talk about the how to test, but hey, here's how you create a scope of work that you can confidently fulfill, and it's going to work. Because so many times when guys run into that situation, they're guessing because they don't know. They have no idea how to create a scope of work. A lot of guys are great at testing, but then when it comes to how do you fix it, it's the confidence level just drops.
Yeah. But we've simplified it, right? It's as simple as
you have to
put the right size duct in each room, right? Size the ductwork accordingly to NCI. We take the spreadsheet, we laminate it, and we resize it to that, right? You're going to, if because we all know that the standard air conditioning trade passed down from person to person is use a 0.1 setting on the supply side and use a 0.08 on the return side, right?
Oh yeah.
And a lot of cases that'll work, but in Florida with flex duct, that will not work, right? We're sizing flex duct at 0.05, right? So we're 50% larger than right. Every duct run is increasing by 50% or more, or we're adding additional supplies to those rooms, which a lot of times is easier than increasing, because if you increase now you got to cut drywall and change boots and all that other stuff. So a lot of times it's just add, right? So, but there is a big misconception, and because of the small number of members that we do have, that airflow model for some reason is a bad thing. That's the culture in Florida for sure, that somehow or another we're doing something dishonest or unethical.
Well,
when in reality, we're the only ones doing it the right way.
So a few minutes ago, Tom, you made a point, like you would assume nobody's testing.
Yes.
And I think generally speaking, that's probably fairly accurate. And the reason why I say that is I did a presentation about a year ago, and I did a little bit of research. The DOE did an independent study. It was a review on 44 independent studies across the country. And they looked at all the different, sizing of equipment, airflow capacity, the whole shebang, right? And what they found was, there's a different range depending on where it was tested in the country, but up to 93% of equipment moved less than 350 CFM per ton,
right.
Which means basically, almost 9 out of 10 systems don't have enough airflow.
I would.
It's a big problem.
I would guarantee it. I would guarantee it, right? Because think about who's doing. Let's talk about where the problem comes from, right? Who's doing new construction? Who does new work? I don't. I won't touch it. Never haven't done it in 20 plus years because they, right? Because unfortunately, it is what it is. That market requires the least expensive contractor, right? The only way you're getting those jobs is if you're the cheapest guy. Typically, right? Certainly, there's custom builders that hire, quality. I'm not saying that anybody that does new construction isn't doing quality work, but they certainly have the biggest misunderstanding about airflow.
Right.
And especially if it's, sorry, Adam.
Go ahead.
Especially if you mentioned the price driven part. If that's the driver in the installation, then quality is going to go downhill from there. It just those two, low price and high quality, don't exist. They battle each other.
And they can't. Who's sizing it? Who's sizing
right? Well, and see that I think is the key, Tom. Is you mentioned the retrofit market when a customer is asking a contractor to come out and install, say, an inverter based heat pump, which requires, guys say the equipment's not the same as it used to be, and it's not. It requires a lot more precision in the installation. But an unknowing contractor who's not measuring is going to go out. They're going to install that brand new piece of equipment on an old duct system that somebody installed with their primary goal being the lowest price to get in and out fast. And now they own that duct system. So they're not even protecting their company where you are.
Yeah, no, and of course, like if you install that 20-SEER duct system, which we've talked about, all these new side discharges and all these units that are great, and the manufacturers love to sell them. But at the end of the day, I put that thing on and I got 0.8 inches of static, 1 inch of static, or even higher in some cases, right? And then just problem, going off with sensors and just over and over and over again. And, they make it even worse sometimes by saying, oh, master bedroom, we'll just add a zone, right? We'll put a zone damper on. Now we'll put a 20-inch bypass damper and, all these different things. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. But we are the minority on this call, I can assure you. Of course, we're talking with like-minded, and that's why I wanted to do this, was to talk to a community that actually understands how I do business. They taught me how to do it. But there's a real, especially in Florida, there's a real black cloud around it that we're just trying to find something to sell somebody, when in reality, all we're doing is measuring and testing and then offering solutions based on, hey, how do we take these measurements and how are they impacting you and your family and the health of your family? And are you interested in resolving it? And then we provide the data and the proof. And, I would say probably, 70% of the time people choose not to do anything about it. They're skeptical because no contractor, right? Because think about it like this in Florida. Right? How many people have never used an air conditioning contractor in Florida? Probably almost none, right? Like everybody's in Florida has touched an air conditioning company at some point. They just have, right? And some people have touched them several times. And you see some of these homes where they've bought air conditioning systems 2 or 3 times. And they'll always say, well, my last guy never told me about that, right?
Yeah.
You get that move, and then now you're in a potential controversial situation where maybe that was their buddy, maybe that was I've personally opened my mouth in situations like saying things like, because now we're talking about the communication piece of this, is like, well, who did this is all wrong, this, that, and then and then I literally had the lady say, well, that was my father did all this and he passed a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So I mean, I've
That's
been
a
in
hard
that
one.
situation, right? I mean, I have, because sometimes we take the education, especially a guy like me, right? Like I've made my living at the kitchen table selling people air conditioning systems over the years. And sometimes I'm too excited about the opportunity that I found, right? So I found all these things, and we can make the customer feel not what I call not okay, right? We have an ability to take this stuff and go, well, you got all these problems here. Let me show you. And we can make them feel not okay about it, right? Because now
That's a great point.
We're actually making them feel not okay and feeling uncomfortable in their own home. Like, why is this guy coming in here and telling me all about my ductwork? Why does he come in here and tell me about all my airflow? I've had 3 air conditioning contractors over the last 20 years. None of them have ever said anything to me about it, right? So we really have to pay attention to how we communicate this to the homeowner. And I think that's the biggest thing. And even me personally, with my team, where we lack, right? Where we lack and how we communicate with the customer, and how we present it, right? How do we get the customer to have a free will, voluntary commitment that they even want to hear about this? Because some people don't even want to hear about it, right? Because we think about, because even in Virginia, as I told you earlier, we'd have a 10-month shoulder season, for instance, right? Well, here in Florida, it's probably 8 or 9 months, because we don't have much of a winter. So the shoulder season is actually longer. Now, this winter, we had a pretty good cold spell, but we'll even have, 8 or 9 month shoulder season here. I mean, it was 79 degrees here yesterday or day before yesterday. It was cool and the wind was blowing, right? So what do you do on those days, right? Technicians always want to say, oh, we don't have any no cools. We don't have any, it's like, brother, you don't need no cools.
There's work.
You don't need them.
Yeah.
What do you need a no cool for? So that we can sell a compressor and then it's going to fail 2 months later because they got 1 inch of static? Why did the compressor fail? Why did the blower motor fail? Why did the evaporator coil fail? Because the static's too high. It's critical failure, right? And this industry just does not treat it like they need to treat it. 30 years talking, 20 years of airflow design and combustion analysis design, there is not enough emphasis placed on this model. And it really needs to get out there. And that's kind of why I got on this call today with you guys, is because, I get a little frustrated, to be honest, because I get criticized for it quite frequently. That, oh, they're just trying to sell them ductwork, whatever. But, and I take responsibility for that because I haven't done a good enough job with my teammates showing them how we need to approach the customer with said problems, right? Because I think we're a little too anxious or a little too happy about trying to, promote our services with airflow, and maybe a little too proud of it, because I am proud of it, right? Because I know that I'm doing it the right way. There's not a doubt in my mind.
So let me ask you this. A minute ago, you mentioned that it's very easy to make the customer feel not okay by, how you communicate the findings on a service call or a sales call. So how would you approach, like, what's your ideal way to communicate that and, portray it in a way where they're going to feel okay and they're going to receive it well?
Yeah. So that's great. That's a great question, Adam. I appreciate that. The best way that I found over the years, and I've done ride-alongs all over the country. I've done it from Oregon to California to Florida to South Carolina to Virginia. I've been in a lot of different states and I've ran this exact model. And what I would do every call is, hey, we got to find out what's important to the home, right? What is it? What's not important to us? We're an NCI airflow first company, and right, by God, you better replace your ductwork, or we're going to tell it. We're going to tell on you, kind of thing, right? No, it's, hey, listen, let's have a conversation with the homeowner. Let's see how they live. Let's see how the family lives. Let's find out, because I could say something like to the homeowner, and I'll tell you how I introduce it, right? I'll just get a 6-foot step ladder, and maybe they're in the kitchen, maybe they're in the living room, whatever, and I'll just put the ladder up and start measuring the temperature coming out of registers. Let's get the conversation, and they'll say, "What are you doing?" Right? And then I'll just get the conversation started. Maybe I'll have a conversation about it at the beginning of the call, like, "Hey, listen, if I happen to find anything that's outside of the manufacturer's recommendations, would you like to know about it?" Let's just find out if they even want to know about it, right? So maybe they do, maybe they don't. And then I might ask them again before I present it to them. I say, "Hey, listen, Mary, the last thing I want to do is add any stress or pressure to your day. But if you'd like, are you still interested in hearing about this thing?" "Yes, I would." "Okay, great. Here, let me show you what's going on with your system." And then we can explain the vitals to them. And, and then we can, if you're a good communicator, I've always kind of felt like I was pretty good at it over the years, and just running thousands and thousands of sales calls and service calls over the years. I can really feel, right? It's more about, now we're kind of getting into a sales thing, but body language and tonality is very important. How we communicate with people, right? It's 93% of the communication. 7% is the word spoken. So it's really how we're saying it, how we're addressing it, so that we're not turning people off about it and making them think, hey, you're just here to try to sell me ductwork today. So there's a lot to be placed on the contract, because it's one thing to go to the NCI training and learn all these wonderful tools, but it's a whole nother thing that the customer actually wants to invest with us.
And that's a danger. That is a real danger, what you're talking about, Tom, because people get, especially those that are technically oriented. They want to go in, they want to test. And what you just summarized was, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to talk to you about something that you never asked about. We're going to tell you how bad your house is and say, hey, pay me to fix it.
Yeah.
And then we wonder, why don't people pay us to fix it?
And then we wonder why
it's not the testing, it's the approach to the testing.
That's exactly.
We forget we're not just selling air conditioners. We serve people.
We serve people
ultimately.
And how do we tie that back to the personal impact, right? This simple questions like, hey, could you take me to the room that heat and cools the best? Well, I don't know about the best, but my daughter's room, Natalie, well, what did she say? What was that like? What is her opinion, right? Well, my husband, Jim, this is his office. Jim, what's your opinion of the temperature in this room? Are you comfortable in here? Is it, oh, no, Tom, in the afternoon, it's always really hot here. But, right. So that's what we're looking for, is how do we tie this, right? It's great to have all these technical data and facts, because when you have that, you have conviction, right? And that's all I need is conviction. I need truth, and I need facts, and I need data. And when I have those things, now I feel extremely confident and calm when I'm speaking to a homeowner, to be able to go down this path about, hey, I know when you called me out here today, you weren't planning on spending several thousands of dollars to replace a duct system, right? Because it's been up in the attic for 30 years, and now you walking in off the street doing a tune-up, and all of a sudden think that I'm going to spend all this money on a new duct system? Why would I do that? Why would somebody do that? Because I got a little NCI badge or a NATE badge or Angie's List badge? They don't do it because of that. They never have. They don't do it because you're running a special. They don't do it because you're running a rebate.
No.
That's not why customers purchase. It's never been why they purchase. People buy when it has a personal impact. They either have pain in the present, or they have fear, or they have something to gain. Those are the three reasons why people purchase. It's not because the static pressure gauge says 0.8. That's not it.
So, Tom, we've talked a lot about the issues with people's homes and communicating and, selling solutions. But one thing we haven't talked about is the results. So you said you do test out in that. What kind of results have you had? And, what are the reactions with the homeowners and your customers when you're finished with these projects?
Yeah, well, we post all the outcome of the call into the Slack channels, and we show the customer, what we share it with them. We have the installer, we take lots of photos and pictures, and then we show them the increase in the design. Did we go from a D to a B plus? Did we go from a C to an A? We show them the Measure Quick reports, and we show them that their money was well spent. Right? The Measure Quick is just a really simplistic way of doing it. Now, I know it's only measuring the capacity at the equipment. I think that NCI has a tool to add to that to get the delivered efficiency, doesn't it?
You do.
Yeah, we're going to be adding that. But just getting Measure Quick, right? Because the key with any business is this, right? How many best practice groups are there out there nowadays? There's all kinds of them, right? And once upon a time in my life, I've probably been a member of every single one of them. But here's the delta. That you start here, you want to end up here. Implementation is in the middle. How do I implement a process into my business and then ensure that everyone's going to do it every single time, no matter what? How do I ensure that? Well, that's when we started using call by call. That was a thing thrown around. It's still a word loosely thrown around, and you'll see a lot of people doing it a lot of different ways, right? but it's more process driven than it is sales driven. Because you hear people that say, oh, I'm a call by call manager, which means he's probably a phone closer who sits in the office and waits for a technician to call him so he can communicate over the phone, which we certainly participate in. But more importantly is that, hey, I've got a manager sitting there watching someone follow a 37-step process, right? Like it's, I could actually share with you a little bit. Let's see if I can screen share. So we use Slack as a means to manage the process, right? So like here's an as-built duct drawing. I'll kind of go through the top here and show you what we're doing in the home, right? So we'll start out, we've got a 37-step process that we run on every call, right? So we literally have 37 steps that we make sure is ran on every single service call, right? So I've got the technicians are out here literally like numbering, hey, step 1, step 2, right? We make them show a picture of them, make sure that they're ready for the day. We do an automatic load count. This is what I was telling you about Drew's program. We do this automatically for every call. We're making sure that, hey, before we even get into communication, what size system do they need? Let's just deal with that fact, right? Then we look at, where the thermostat's set at, we get the data plates dealt. And this is the vitals, right? So we're checking the return static, the supply static, and the total static. Now, why do I use the gauge and not the digital? Because we have to use the digital to use measure quick. So we're also having them do the digital way. But we do this for demonstration purposes to the homeowner. It's really easy to see a gauge, right? So, and then that's what I was telling you, like you'll see a lot of these units are rated at 0.2. This unit's rated at 0.2. You see that all day in Florida, and here we are at 0.7 something, right? So we're 3.5 times normal. And of course, I didn't use that old blood pressure analogy. Ms. Jones, if your blood pressure was 3.5 times normal, where would you be? And just by simply asking that question, I get the customer to recognize that their unit is sick, right? And are they concerned about it, right? Of course, getting the vitals, the delta T, the superheat subcool, right? And then we'll keep moving through. They're doing their inspection. We make them go up in the attic and look at all the duct work, take pictures of it. And then we get our measure quick, right? Now we can see this unit's operating at 74% capacity. So we really dial this in, and then test out if we do minor repairs and things of this nature. Like this is a minor duct modification. And then we do a room by room so that we can see what size ducts going into each room. And then we'll redesign and so on and so forth. So we have a channel for every job. And that way we know exactly what's going on with every service call, right? And of course, there's a lot. We're running 150 service calls a day, not all air conditioning. We're probably running about 80 air conditioning calls a day, somewhere in there, probably 50 or 60 plumbing calls a day, and a handful of electrical calls. So, but every one of these calls is reviewed. Anytime something's sold, we have a compliance team that's going to be looking at this stuff to make sure that we designed it right. Because, like, let's say, for instance, the salesperson sold it incorrectly. Our goal, once it's agreed upon and it's sold, no matter what, we're going to do the job the right way. I don't care what he sold, right? At the end of the day, I mean, I do, of course, but what I mean by that is that no matter what, we're going to re-engineer and design the job and do it the right way, no matter what. And I've got a team of people that look at that, so that I can make sure that each job is done per the standard, right? So we go through a lot of painstaking processes and steps in the building, but it gives the business structure, right? Because most people think about it, right? How did we do it for years? I used to have an alphanumeric pager, right? They just send you an address, and off you go, right? Hey, and then when the dispatcher would leave at 8:00, he would go ahead and dispatch me 4 or 5 more of them, right? He would go, hey, I got a couple more. I need you to run after that one. I'm heading to the house. Let me know if you need anything, right? So I'm sure you've been there. So nowadays it's way different, right? We have to have, and if you're going to implement processes like this into your company, you have to have transparency. You just can't depend on a technician filling out a form on service type. That won't get it done, right? Or a paper checklist. That's not going to get it done.
Yep.
That's not going to ensure that someone's checking static pressure and doing a duct drawing to determine, how is this air conditioning system, as you said, David, system, that's a great word because it is a system. How is the system operating? Not just, hey, does it need refrigerant? Hey, it needs a capacitor. Hey, it needs a pull and clean. Why does it need a pull and clean? Why did it get that dirty? Why did it get that nasty? Right? So those are the things that we really focus in on as a business. And we've done it. We've performed that piece of it very well. And obviously communicating with homeowners about how we're going to improve their life, hopefully, right? Because at the end of the day, we want a referral. We want the customer after the fact to go, man, my master suite never did heat and cool this well, right? Man, these guys did a bang up job.
So how does your process affect your referrals? Like you have an impressive process. It's I've never seen anything like that before.
That's transparent, man.
Yeah.
It's transparent, right? I would say that obviously if we're booking 150 calls a day, we've serviced 46,000 clients in the community.
Wow.
46,000 in 3 years, right? So I would say certainly there's a lot of people that appreciate our service, but I can promise you there's been a lot of resistance to it. The airflow model, I've listen, the only thing different that I've done in this business from my previous two businesses is use technology in a different way to make sure that that I know for a fact that we're measuring static, that I know for a fact we're doing duct drawing. So otherwise I don't know, right? Like you have a technician bring a stack of tickets in at the end of the week. I mean, we started doing this type of transparency, not quite to this level back in 15, 16, because I would make the technicians send me pictures and photos of everything and email it to the dispatcher before, or text it to her, whatever he was doing back in those days, before he could get another call, right? Because that's the true management of it is, well, hey, Mr. Technician, I'm sorry you weren't willing to do that measure quick for me today. However, since you didn't understand how to use it, why don't you make your next call the office so that we can retrain you on how to use it properly?
Yeah.
Oh, I got it figured out. No, I don't want to come, because technicians don't want to come to the shop. They want to go to the next call, right?
Right.
And they should want to go to everybody wants to get home at the end of the day, but we've got to hold people accountable in the business. Our biggest shortfall is we need to do a better job communicating this stuff to the homeowner and not just shoving it on them, right? And I think that's, I've done such a good job of promoting the airflow model in my business that I think everybody eats and breathes it. And sometimes, that, hey, every problem, which we all would agree that every problem that static pressure has failed is a problem. But sometimes, just charging the unit back up will get the customer up and operational. We don't have to replace every duct system just to charge a unit. So there's a balance, right? Like we have to balance this out and determine, so it's a feel type thing, I would say for sure.
That was I love learning about your process, Tom. And it's super interesting to see how you use Slack and the internal communications you guys have with your office team as well as the technicians in that. And there's a lot of accountability there to make sure everyone's doing their job correctly and nothing
There is a lot of accountability to it. There's several people involved from, and it's Service Titan is a great software, right? Like I resisted Service Titan for many years because I was on Successware 21 for many, many years. And I promise you, I had somebody out from Successware 21 in my business at least once a month, cleaning that thing up, fixing it, doing this, doing that. Of course, it was a very sophisticated software. It had its own accounting package, and it was very hard to find a controller or bookkeeper on the business. And I was fortunate enough to have one that picked up on it and ran with it. But just implementing softwares in a business itself can be very difficult. Slack, if you can text your wife, you can use Slack, right? Like if you can text somebody, you can use Slack and post a picture. And especially with the younger crowd, the younger generation that we have working for us nowadays, something like Slack is very easy to use in the business.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, we're coming up to an hour now. It's awesome to see where you started and where you're at right now. And I'm really
Yeah.
interested to see where you're going to be, a handful of years from now. I mean, the amount that your business has grown in the last 3 years is incredible.
Yeah.
But it's kind of humbling to be a part of NCI and hearing that you've implemented some of the stuff that you've learned and had such success with it. That's amazing to hear.
Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of success with it over the years, and all three businesses, leading with airflow, leading with on the gas furnace market. Certainly, combustion analysis is a critical piece of the puzzle. And only reason I got on here is I think it's good for contractors to become aware, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's not. I think it's actually rising tide lifts all boats, right? So I would rather have everybody in town measuring airflow and being trained through NCI standards, and everybody presenting it, than I would be the only guy doing it. Because that's where it looks like I'm either the village idiot or the smartest guy in the room, right? And that's where you've got to, I'm open to sharing with anybody, NCI standards and, just doing basic airflow testing and just pull out a fan chart and go, well, here you go, right? You're only getting 1,200 CFMs at 0.5, Bubba, right? At 0.85, you reduced it to 800 CFMs or 0.8, right? We reduced it to 900 CFMs. We've reduced the capacity by 20 or 30%. Just a very simple math, right? We need 1,200. We're getting 900. How much did we reduce it? That's simple, right? Just that simple math without even getting elaborate into measure quicks and delivered efficiency and all these other types of things that you can certainly go to the next level with. I would say the biggest failure that I had implementing it 20 years ago was that we made them do heat max and cool max like immediately. We're having the technicians do the math, the enthalpy change, all of these things can be more difficult, right, to implement in technicians. But with the technology that we have nowadays, it makes it a lot simpler for technicians to implement. And it makes, honestly, when you have a process like this, it makes it easy to train entry-level technicians. You can train them on your process versus trying to teach them everything about air conditioning.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Tom, thank you. I'm hoping we're going to talk soon. And I'd love to see you. I know this year we're filled up, but if possible, and next year, the NCI Summit, you would be a great speaker at the summit to tell your story and to teach people what, all the things you've gone through in your career. But I'd love to see you out if possible. It'd be great to connect with you.
Yeah, guys. Listen, I appreciate the invite today. I appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about my experience. And, I've been very grateful to NCI and, I was good friends with Rob back in the day. And just all the support that NCI has given me over the years. It changed the trajectory of my career for sure. And it's just had a super positive impact on my life.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
David, have a great day, y'all. We'll see y'all soon.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.